It's fast, it's sleek, it's stylish. And when Honda decided to build a performance car, they didn't take on just any sports car.
I love the way it performed. You know, with a little TLC, the car was as good as new. As good as any Porsche on the road, as good as any car I've ever had in the past.
The Mazda Miata revived the two-seater in North America, and the engineers who designed the car thought a lot about what they wanted in a sports car.
For British market, I want to have a planned oil leak on Friday. Just a tiny little drop of oil, so the guys have an excuse to work on the car on Saturday, you know, the hood up and that.
But before either the NSX or the Miata could come to the scene, there had to be Z cars.
This is not your typical Japanese car. Japanese cars before the Datsun came out was a small, boxy, underpowered, poor handling. The Z car changed all of that.
The Japanese take on classic sports cars, modern style, and recycled steel. This is the most reliable supercar ever built. A car that starts every time you turn the key, requires only regular maintenance, and runs like, well...
It drives like a well-oiled machine.
The Honda NSX has been called the first everyday supercar. And for 17 years, it's the everyday part that's the most important for Jim Ellies.
Reliability was number one. That was unequivocal. I just put every year, I drive it every day through the summer, put it away every November. I brought it out every April, started first time, took it, as I said, for an oil change, tire change, and that was it. And no major expenses along the way.
Jim's love affair with his NSX started in the rain, like so many great romances often do.
One day I was going to work and I caught in a rainstorm and car died on me, third time, so I actually pulled over, pushed the car to the side of the road, and there was an Acura dealership. I walked in for cover and then I saw it. At which point I said it was love at first bite, and I said it had to come home with me. And the car has now close to 300,000 kilometers on it. It's been extraordinarily reliable. All you do is put gas in it, a set of tires on it every year, a little oil, and she just keeps running.
For Jim Ellies, the NSX was a chance to enjoy a little exotica without the risk.
Well, you got to picture 1994. There were very few great sports cars around. The days of 20, 30 years ago, the GTOs or the big muscle cars were gone. And I saw a complete package here. I imagined it had great suspension. It was probably fairly powerful. The engine was made by Honda. It was a mid-engine car. I couldn't go wrong.
When the NSX appeared in 1990, it was Honda's attempt to compete with Ferrari. But unlike the Italian supercar, the Honda version was going to be engineered with exquisite precision. The first production aluminum monocoque body, meaning the structural elements were integrated into the body and the entire thing was made up of one piece, not multiple pieces welded or bolted together. In the firm belief that a lighter car is a faster car, The Honda engineers used the most advanced materials they could find at the time and managed to shave 200 kilograms off the overall weight. They also developed variable valve timing for the V6 engine, ensuring the perfect amount of fuel and oxygen would end up in the cylinders when you hammered down the accelerator. And for 17 years, all of this made Jim very happy.
As I got a little older, I realized I wanted a little more power. And so after 300,000 kilometers, I looked at the car, and this was back in 2007. I realized I wanted something different, so I went looking around for a different car.
Ultimately, Jim decided he loved the car too much to toss it aside for another exotic. So, he decided a renovation upgrade was in order.
All my friends thought I was absolutely out of my tree. So we started on the engine, of course, and we did everything. We built the engine, put a supercharger on it, intercooler. I mean, I went wild in the engine, but of course you can't stop there because you need better brakes. Changed the ABS braking system. Then we went to the suspension system. Then we went to the exhaust system. Then we looked at the transmission. We built the transmission because of the age of the car. Put in what's called a Japanese short gear system. All that does is it takes the car to a higher level in terms of performance. Put a better sound system in the car. The sound system was adequate for the time, but I'm a fellow from the 70s. I love my hard rock and crank it up. So we put a stereo system in.
Jim figured this would be a good time to upgrade the engine management systems as well.
This is basically the stereo system, if you will. It's got the GPS, but the marvelous thing about it is I can convert it to see all my key engine criteria. In this case, I'm monitoring my air-fuel ratio. That's the amount of air to fuel. My intake manifold in terms of pounds per square inch. My inlet temperatures, if that and the coolant temperature, and I can be able to see it. So the car obviously prevent overheating. My battery and my amount of RPMs, and all that data over a period of time, the engine is learning. And the more you drive it, the car, the more it learns. When the car came out, it showed 520 horsepower at the crank as compared to 270. And we showed about 440 horsepower at the wheel. So we've taken the car to a whole new level, and quite frankly, this is the way Mother Honda should have built the car. And I just absolutely love it now.
Jim figures he spent an easy $35,000 or $40,000 on the upgrades. Wouldn't it have been a lot easier to simply buy a Porsche?
The car was ageless. You know, how many of these were built? Not too many. They discontinued them, I believe, a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I loved the car. I loved the way it performed. You know, with a little TLC, the car was as good as new, as good as any Porsche on the road, as good as any car I've ever had in the past.
And it is those past cars, specifically one past car, that has informed all Jim's decisions, including the original decision to buy the NSX.
I'm a product of the 70s, and I had a 1973 240Z. And it was absolutely exquisite. It had the sex appeal back then. Granted, it didn't have the performance, it didn't have the cornerability, but it was sleek and sexy for the 70s. I can think of back in 73 when I had my 240Z ripping around corners. This car just does it a lot better. This is a much more refined 240Z.
The Fair Lady Z, known in North America as the Datsun Z cars, changed the image of Japanese imports forever. This is what saved the reputation of Japanese cars in North America.
This is not your typical Japanese car. The Japanese cars before the Datsun came out was a small, boxy, underpowered, poor handling. It was built for the Japanese market and they thought they could sell them here. They soon found out that the American market would not look at them. The Z car changed all of that. All of a sudden they had power, they had charisma, styling, and even to a certain point, I would say sex appeal. They were just a sensation right from the word go. What you got for your money as far as performance and handling was phenomenal. They rewrote the book on sports cars.
In Japan, they were known as the Fair Lady Z. Built by Nissan, at the factory they were also called the S30. In North America, however, they were called the Datsun Z cars.
Datsun was a small car company in Japan, what was bought out by Nissan. They kept the name. When they started selling them in North America, they didn't want to use the Nissan names. I've heard stories that they thought it sounded too Japanese. They came out with the Datsun banner.
Nissan had also been deeply involved in arms manufacturing in World War II, and another story claims they were concerned the American public would hold their past against them. Brian Gracie didn't care. His Z car is a 280. He bought it in 1976. By that time, the car had already gone through 2 number changes. The original 240Z became the 260, which morphed again into the 280.
Handling-wise is the same. Body-wise is pretty well identical. Size is identical. The bumpers are the only thing what makes the car longer than the original 240. All the panels are basically the same, interchangeable on the cars.
It's 1976. Jimmy Carter is elected president. The Concorde takes its first flight. And the Apple Computer Company is formed. And Brian Gracie is hankering for something sporty.
Had a 71 Pinto runabout, bought it because it was cheap, good looking car, it was metallic brown, drove for a couple years, paid it off, saved a little money, wanted a new sports car, fast car, whatever. Went looking, looked at everything from Mustangs to Corvettes to Chevelles. Didn't fit in them very well.
And when Brian says he didn't fit in, he means he did not fit in.
I'm 6'5", just don't fit in a lot of cars. Finally, I happened by a Datsun dealership one night, opened the door, put the seat all the way back, tried to get in. When I swung my legs in, I could put them all the way out straight, and I said, oh my, this could be it. So the list price was $7,900. I've got the car with trade-in and a discount for it being a supposed demo with 500 miles on it for $6,800 with tax and delivery and everything. Thought it was a fortune at the time. Made the first couple of payments, said, I can do this. I can live and drive the car.
And so began a 30-plus year love affair.
Bought the car in 1976, did regular oil changes, put gas in it, drove it. Replaced first set of tires at 45,000 original miles. This is the second set of tires on the car. Haven't done anything else until 2006, where I did shocks, clutch, and brakes. The brakes I could have probably done another 2 or 3 years on. Had the time, decided to do them there. The first 4 years I had it was my daily summer driver. I probably had about 42 to 45,000 original miles. Since then, it's been babied. They did have a reputation for rusting. I knew about that before I bought it, so it never got winter driven. But besides for that, it has been just an absolute gem to own. Just shy of 90,000 original miles on it right now.
Brian says his favorite thing to do in his Datsun 280Z is this. The tighter and the faster, the better.
I was never much into street drag racing, but I love corners, and this car handles amazingly well. Full independent suspension all the way around. It just loves taking corners. And that's what turned me on back when I was a kid. It takes me back to my 20s. It's just like a time machine almost for me. I truly get thrilled when I get to drive it. You get busy sometimes, you don't drive for maybe 3 weeks, a month, but when you go out and fire it up and take it for a drive around the block even, it's real.
The Datsun Z cars opened up the North American buyer's eyes to what Japanese engineering could accomplish. The next big breakthrough would have to wait 19 years for the Mazda Experimental 5. We also know it as the Miata. The little Miata hurtles down the Canyon Road just south of San Francisco. You'll see thousands of Miatas coming and going all over North American roads, but only one, this one, will be driven by its daddy.
Mazda decided to have a design studio in USA where the market is. Instead of shooting from Japan the long-range missile, so they wanted to have somebody here in the US to look the market and finding a good idea for the Mazda future Mazda product. So they built the studio, and I was hired to be the leader for that studio.
The concept? A two-seater convertible, similar to, but better than sports cars already on the roads. The reason? Because Mazda's engineers believed nobody was building the kind of cars they wanted to drive.
So we, usually sit around flipping through magazines or whatever, talk about what you like, what kind of car you want to have, all that. And every time we look at it, either the car we want is very expensive or very old. Two-seater sports car there, like Alfa Romeo Fiat 124, was in the market but 10 years old. They never, refreshed those cars. So the car we really want didn't exist.
These days, Tom is head of the Industrial Design Department at the San Francisco Art Institute. Born in Japan, maybe it was inevitable that Tom Matano would end up designing a car like the Miata.
This is 1963, so I don't know how I was 15 or 16 years old. These are the back of a notebook, as you can tell, and I used to sketch a lot of different cars. This happened to be a Mazda Familia. Little did I know that I was going to work for Mazda then. And maybe here, this is 65. As you can tell, my skills are improved a lot better as the year goes on. And this is my original, those are existing cars, but this is my original design. I was fixated with a fastback at a time, and this is 1964.
The original Miata was called the MX-5, short for Mazda Experiment No. 5. It was part of an in-house design competition between the Tokyo-based studio, which wanted to build a more typically Japanese front-engine, front-wheel drive version, and Tom's California studio, which wanted the front-engine, rear-wheel drive configuration. To break down head office resistance, the team created a mission statement, painting a picture of the customer's relationship with the car. It began, "The customer takes the car home."
The customer takes the car home and of course takes the family for a ride, shows it to their neighbors and friends. But just before retiring to the bed that very exciting day, you peek into the garage and one last look, or even say goodnight to the car, or maybe even sit in it in the car one last time. We had many meetings with the engineers in Japan. In one meeting, I went out and talked about each different countries. So for British market, I want to have a planned oil leak on Friday. Just a tiny little drop of oil, so the guys have an excuse to work on the car on Saturday, you know, the hood up and that. And then for US, I want to have a rattle built into the car. 2 years later, start to rattle. Oh, of course, Japanese engineer never thought of leaking cars or rattle cars. They didn't understand the joke that I put it on to them.
The original Mazda Miata came out in 1989 and sold for about $14,000. It was an immediate hit. Probably because in the original design, even the smallest detail was important.
Our wish was to have this to be the headlamp for the simplicity reasons. But there were no technology available at the time to make it work. So we ended up having a secondary or headlamp being hidden when not in use. Now, one of the trips I went to Japan, I saw this being developed, was just a square box. And for me, we can't have this square box as part of the car. So I went and grabbed a clay tool and shaped these things to make it more character. It's closest to the motorcycle in freedom on four wheels. Nimble, agile, convertible, of course, or jogging shoes. I used to call them jogging shoes. You know, the other sports cars, the high-end sports cars, are spiked shoes designed for certain purposes. This one, just put the jogging shoes on, drive around the block, you get the light sweat and excitement, you know, and then feel good about it.
Tom still drives a first-generation Miata, the one with the hideaway headlights. As he cruises the back roads near his San Francisco home, he imagines himself in an Italian two-seater.
I just love the Italian passion. I am an Italian trapped in Japanese body. I eat pasta every day. I drink 12 cups of espresso every day. So I think natural that I like the Italian cars. It's a truth.